A huge trade was dealt on Saturday. Demar Derozan has been traded to the Sacramento Kings as part of a three-team deal. In exchange, the Bulls received Chris Duarte, two second-round picks, and cash considerations, and the San Antonio Spurs are going ahead and gaining veteran forward Harrison Barnes from Sacramento. And the question for today is DeRozan enough to make the Kings true contenders in the West? Let's answer it right now. Welcome back to the Play by Play podcast. This is a bonus clip, a clear, quick take on a breakdown of recent breaking news. If you are watching this on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe. Leave a comment down below on your thoughts on the video, and please leave a like. And if you have not already, please go ahead and follow all of our social medias, the TikTok, Instagram, and X/Twitter, where you can see more of these clips from recent podcasts, where you can see more of these takes on breaking news. The TikTok is at official play by play. The Instagram is play by play underscore podcast, and our X/Twitter is play by play underscore pod 0. Now, wow, boom, finally, a huge trade has finally been dealt in the NBA offseason. We have been waiting in complete anticipation, and it really seemed like this was going to be one of the most predictable, one of the most boring offseasons in a couple of years. I mean, we have been waiting, and Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are still in Phoenix. Trae Young is still in Atlanta. Brandon Ingram is still in New Orleans. And while we have gotten a couple trades, such as Mikal Bridges getting traded to New York, such as DeJounte Murray getting traded to New Orleans, both trades which make both of those teams huge players in their respective conferences, none of them seem to have the real wow impact, the real out of nowhere type of impact on social media and really on the league as a whole. But this trade was completely out of nowhere, but not as crazy as I really believe, because recently I have been talking to a friend. If you know who you are, shout out to you. But we were talking about the potential destinations for DeRozan because he was still on the market. And just speaking on that, I was super worried about the direction that he was going to go to. I mean, we have seen players recently in the NBA, such as Kemba Walker, Eric Bledsoe, DeMarcus Cousins, Dwight Howard, veteran players that just seem to not be valued anymore by the NBA and have had to gone off to overseas teams, to overseas leagues, and have to fend for themselves and bring a name and value to themselves over there. And with how much time was being dealt to bring DeRozan to a franchise, with how much little his value seemed to be diminished, I was fearful that he was going to be picked up at all. I mean, it seemed like Chicago had absolutely no motivation to bring him back. They wanted to get him off of their team, and I did not believe that they were going to be able to find a suitor that was going to be able to give them the value that they really wanted for somebody like him, who is a borderline superstar, not a superstar, not a great player, but a good, solid player, for them to give him away. And finally, they get it now. And I think, by the way, that Chicago got a really solid deal out of this. Again, just speaking on them specifically out of this deal, they continue to build a really young core. You now have guys such as Josh Giddey, Patrick Williams, Matas Buzelis. You now add in Chris Duarte, who is an exceptional three-point shooter and is somebody who, once again, is going to be able to be developed. Just as Jalen Smith was when they signed him out of free agency, they have brought in another player that is going to add to a core that 4 or 5 years from now is either going to have one of these players become a dynamic superstar, or where 4 or 5 of these players are going to become really great role players on a very solid Eastern team. As far as the Spurs go on this side of the deal, not thinking much of this. Again, I like this deal for them just simply based on the fact that they brought in veteran experience. They're bringing in a veteran forward. He's going to be help. Harrison Barnes is going to help mold guys such as Keldon Johnson and Jeremy Sohan. Talk to them about some of the experiences he had. He has a championship under his belt. He has high playoff experience. He has played with incredible guys, incredibly talented guys in the league, such as Steph Curry, such as Klay Thompson. He played with, I believe, Luka Doncic from time to time, Dirk Nowitzki. He has had so many great experience, and he's going to be able to bring that maturity back once again to the San Antonio Spurs franchise. But again, trying not to move too much forward, just wanted to cover those teams really quick. I was having a conversation with a friend and talking about the destinations for DeRozan. And at first, I thought it was pretty simple. I believe that the two LA teams were going to be in heavy consideration for his service, just seeing as LA the LA Lakers really did not make the moves that they wanted to. They really did not improve this roster really at all from the previous year outside of the draft picks in Dalton Knecht and Bronny James. And as we know, that roster that was constructed last year just simply was not enough to contend with the top players in the West, such as Denver, Minnesota, OKC, and Dallas. And now adding New Orleans into that mix, who has become a really solid team. And then there were the Clippers, who lost Paul George, who was a huge piece of what they were moving for, is one of the best two-way forwards in the league, somebody who could obviously go ahead and defend forwards such as LeBron James defensively and still offer a lot of great service offensively. And I felt that DeRozan could plug in, maybe not have the same production that Paul George had, but have very similar. But seeing as neither of those teams seem to be too interested, I spoke on the other players that could be, and that was potentially guys who just barely skipped out on the playoffs that needed that little bit of an extra boost to become true playoff contenders and stay afloat in what is a heavy, heavy Western Conference. And I named teams such as the Atlanta Hawks, obviously, who seems to be going in a younger direction, so I wasn't really sure about them. I mentioned the Golden State Warriors, who still have a very veteran heavy team, who have prospects in Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, who could be used as trade value to swap for DeMar DeRozan and could be used with DeMar DeRozan to form a third star. I looked at teams such as the Houston Rockets, who have been in trade talks to potentially grab Kevin Durant, and obviously those have come to a halt. So potentially they get a borderline superstar, somebody who will not overshadow guys such as Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, and Alperen Sengun, and kind of play the same maturity role that Harrison Barnes is going to be playing in San Antonio, and just build that Rockets team up. And finally, I mentioned the Sacramento Kings, and I think that this is likely the best situation for DeMar DeRozan, and this was the best situation for the Sacramento Kings. And here's why. We have to remember that Sacramento is not a huge market at all. It's not a preferred destination for many big free agents. I mean, look at Sacramento's team as a whole. De'Aaron Fox was drafted. They traded for Domantas Sabonis. Sure, they signed off on Malik Monk, but I believe they got Kevin Huerter in a trade. Many of the players that are on their team right now, they've had to trade for. They've signed, but they are very low market signings. They're very low market free agents, or they have drafted. They have had to build a drafted team. And now you get DeMar DeRozan, who, despite his older age, I believe he is 34 or 35, is going to be on a longer term deal, is going to stay with you for the long term. You form a very, very small, but I think solid big three in De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and DeMar DeRozan, and you add him to a team that now sits to have a lot of great depth. When I look at this squad, you have a starting five of De'Aaron Fox, you have Kevin Huerter, who is a very solid 3-and-D player at this point in the NBA. You add DeRozan to that, you have Keegan Murray, who has had leaps and bounds throughout his career, has not exploded into maybe what Scotty Barnes is in Toronto, but is still a very solid person at the power forward position. Somebody else that Sacramento had to go out and draft and has stuck with them for the long term. You have Domantas Sabonis, and then off the bench, you drafted Devin Carter out of Providence. Very great pickup. They got rid of Davion Mitchell, so he is going to play much more of a role than I originally thought. You have Malik Monk, somebody who was in consideration for Sixth Man of the Year previous year, had an incredible season. Jalen McDaniels, who may not be the talent that Jaden McDaniels is, his brother who is on Minnesota, but still possesses a lot of the same potential and skill set where he is very lengthy. He is very great defensively. He can certainly fill the role of being a spot-up shooter. Trey Lyles, one of the better three-point shooters for low market free agents, especially the power forward position. And Alex Len, who maybe isn't a prestigious backup center that you like, but still has somebody that has been able to be very solid as a backup, has been able to be very solid as not only a rim protector, but a glass cleaner as a backup, and somebody that you can count on. And this is all led by Mike Brown, somebody who has been coach of the year before, who has had some very solid coaching experience with some very great players. He is somebody who has a very solid resume and somebody who Sacramento seems to be sticking with for the long term, which, as we've talked about in previous coaching videos, matters. Giving your coach a chance to lead a team, giving them a chance to form their roster, the guys that they want, and coaching them to success. And we have to remember that this is a Sacramento team that was third in the West just 2 years ago. It was a Sacramento team that, if it wasn't for youth and lack of experience and going up against a draw against a very veteran heavy Warriors team, could have made a very solid playoff run to the Western Conference semifinals, if not the Western Conference finals. Sure, they had a very steep drop off last year. Sure, when you look at many of the statistics, whether it is advanced statistics, whether it is simple things such as offensive rating, points per game, assists per game, they rank very, very average among NBA teams. When you look at virtually every single statistic that I looked at, they are within that 13th to 17th range. They are literally the definition of an average team in the NBA. But like I said, in the West, you need someone to stay afloat. You need someone to break that ceiling that you have, somebody that a ceiling that the Sacramento Kings have had for a while now. And maybe that's DeMar DeRozan, somebody who, like we mentioned, isn't a huge superstar, so he's not going to step on the toes of the main players such as De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis. It was clear that DeRozan wasn't going to be able to be a number one option on a team. We saw him in Toronto, we saw him in San Antonio, we saw Chicago try to make a number one option out of him with their team. It is clear that that's not the case, but is somebody that I would gladly like to have as the third option on my team. And that's the type of role that he's going to be playing on this Sacramento team. He is going to be able to guard some of the best forwards in the Western Conference, which has been a huge, huge hole for Sacramento, just seeing as they don't have that type of dominant defensive guy on the wing. And when you're going up against Anthony Edwards, when you have possibly Aaron Gordon, when you have, trying to think of other guys, Jalen Williams, when you have Zion Williamson, these are the type of guys, LeBron James, these are the type of guys that DeMar DeRozan is going to have the opportunity to guard and is going to give the Sacramento Kings a lot a lot better of a time at limiting their opposing teams to lower amounts of scoring, to lower amounts of points, and is going to make their defense a lot more solid. Now, the only thing that I'm really worried about that I think is lacking with this deal is the shooting. Sacramento was not a very great shooting team to begin with. Again, they are pretty much average. They're around that 15 to 16 mark when it comes to true three-point percentage. DeMar DeRozan obviously doesn't add to that. He does not have the history of great shooting, but he's going to be able to drive to the basket, which is going to be able to open up more three-point opportunities for guys on this team, such as Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk, and Trey Lyles, somebody like De'Aaron Fox, who has improved his three-point shooting over the course of his career. So while he might not immediately add to the true three-point shooting percentage of the Sacramento Kings, he is going to be able to open up a lot more opportunities with them, which is going to be able to give them an opportunity to increase that three-point percentage and become a better three-point shooting team. And finally, the thing that I love most about this is what they had to give up. They did not have to give up a lot. They did not have to give up any draft capital whatsoever. You give up 2 second-round picks. I'm not sure, by the way, if that was from Sacramento or San Antonio. I'm not for sure about that. So maybe it isn't that they even gave up 2 second-round picks. You give up Harrison Barnes, who I think DeMar DeRozan is just an elevated version of Harrison Barnes. And you give up Chris Duarte, who is a young guy who is going to need years to develop as an all-around scorer, just not from the three-point line. You give up him to the Bulls. It's not really a big deal when, once again, you are contending. Now, the final question I have is, where do they rank amongst Western Conference teams? As if the Western Conference couldn't get any more difficult. I think I still have a couple teams ahead of them. I think when I look at them, I put Minnesota, I put OKC, I put Denver. From there, I think it's a toss-up between many of the other teams, such as that lower tier of Dallas, New Orleans, and Phoenix. I think I put them right up there with those three, just seeing as because you have your PNR duo with Fox and Sabonis. You have the guy who is going to be able to guard some of the best players on both ends in Derozan. You have your main slasher in Derozan. They have a lot of solid pieces, and a lot of solid pieces that many of these other teams had, such as New Orleans. Now, what would separate New Orleans from Sacramento is what I talked about in the New Orleans video, is just seeing as they have this defensive, very lengthy culture. Sacramento, I don't think really has a true identity in which there is not something that they do exceptionally well, but that's just something that they're going to have to figure out. That's something that they're going to have to find. What is their it factor? What is it that separates them from the other team? But if we're talking about man by man by man, yes, they can go along with guys such as New Orleans, Phoenix, Dallas, the Lakers, the Clippers now that have lost Paul George. They can compete with many of those teams, and I think will truly compete for a very solid playoff spot and could potentially make it to the second round of the Western Conference playoffs. Whether that's them upsetting a team such as Denver or maybe another young run from Minnesota, whether it's a 3-6 matchup or a 2-7 matchup or whatever it is, or whether it's them getting matched up in a 4-5 matchup, whether they have home court advantage and winning a very close series there. I think that this team has a lot of experience, a lot of veteran potential, and a lot of really, really solid depth that is going to be able to take them far in the regular season. So let me know what you guys think about this. What do you guys think for this deal? For me, for Sacramento, I give this deal an A minus. I really, really like this. I think once again, the only thing that turns me off is the real shooting potential of this team, but I think that this makes it solid contenders. Let me know what you guys think. Leave your comments below. Please subscribe. Leave a like on the video, and I will see you guys next time. Later.